What's up, everybody? It's your boy Tru Element 78 in the building with.
One and only reigning and defending Mondo Lucha Hall of Famer. What did the five fingers say to the face? The X-Man, Xavier Mustafa.
And I'm the co-signer of kayfabe, proud member of the Pro Wrestling Secret Society, The Natural, Chris Black.
And today is another episode review of Viceland's Dark Side of the Ring. This episode covers the story of Dr. D, David Schultz, and the slap heard around the world. I believe this is episode 7 of Viceland's series. Season 2, I should say, Dark Side of the Ring. So, yeah, we're here to cover that. Jumping right into it, for those of you who don't know, back in the 80s, Dr. Schultz was a professional wrestler for the WWE, and there was a lot of people and a lot of stories going around about wrestling and this was the time when kayfabe was still alive. For those of you who don't know what kayfabe is, I will turn it over to the natural Chris Black to explain what kayfabe is.
You don't know what kayfabe is. What you talking about?
Kayfabe is basically, we work under the premise that everything that we do is real. So it would have been very taboo for the fans to see something other than what's represented in the ring.
Yeah, so during this time that was alive and well. So if people were having beef in the ring, you did not see them going out to get ice cream afterwards. You didn't see them playing video games online together. If you did see them on the street, it had to be on site. And so, but there were rumors going around that wrestling may not be as real as it is portrayed in the ring and on television. And this reporter named John Stossel was out to basically expose the business. So he went to the top of professional wrestling, to the head of professional wrestling, pretty much, one Vincent Kennedy McMahon in the WWF, and decided to start his reporting there. And he was presented with this wrestler named David Schultz, and he stepped up to him, said, "Hey, I think all of this is fake." And he got backhand. Well, he didn't get backhanded, but he got overhand slapped twice, costing David Schultz his job. And that's what this episode covers, and also what happened with him after the slap and what his life became, which was very interesting. Actually, we did a lot of extra research on this one and listened to a lot of interviews. He seems like a really cool guy. And yeah, he led a very interesting life. So his whole thing, David Schultz's whole thing, was that he felt that he was the greatest pro wrestler of all time. He was trained by the legendary Herb Welch, and he described him as a salty, mean bastard who beat the piss out of him. They said that Herb Welch used to take a dump and rub it in his armpits before matches and put people in a headlock until they would tap out or say they couldn't take it anymore.
Pause for a second. That is the sign of a goddamn psychopath.
So how were you trained?
Not under those premises. I'll admit, when I first got into the business, when I showed up for training the first time, my understanding was I was coming in for a tryout. I thought that if I didn't show them something, they'd be like, "Sorry, kid, you're not good enough to train with us." I didn't think anybody was allowed in the business as long as you paid your money. So I went under it with the assumption that this was a tryout, that I may necessarily not get picked to get trained. So of course, I didn't think that pro wrestling was quote unquote real, but I thought that it was, you have to try out. This isn't for everybody. And I mean, this business isn't for everybody.
What was the worst hazing that you got when you first started training? Was there any hazing for you or Xavier Mustafa?
The worst that we got it was chops. That's about it. Well, I got ribbed by proxy because of Xavier Mustafa. Do you want to tell that story? Our debut at ACW Wisconsin.
Oh, okay. So, all right. So at this time, we were being mentored by Matt Winchester, and him and his tag team partner Alvato brought us up to this company called ACW. Was it NWA Wisconsin? Yeah, NWA Wisconsin.
NWA Wisconsin. Yeah, my fault.
So we get brought up there for a tag team tournament. So we're like, okay, this is gonna be cool. Me and Chris Black are gonna be tag teaming. So we get there, and we're getting ready for everything. And I was like, hey, we didn't give anybody our music, and it was like, don't worry, we got music for you. Let me back up a little bit. On the way there, we were talking about like movies that we've seen a million times or whatever, and I brought up that I had seen Titanic at that point about 12 times. And I said the reason why I seen that much because I couldn't get everybody to go at one time. And so I went, one time with this person, one time with this group of people. So I ended up seeing that movie so many times. Fast forward, we get ready to go out. Next thing you know, we hear "My Heart Will Go On" by Celine Dion. And so you have myself and Chris Black coming out to this most non-exciting music ever. We made it off.
We played it off. And the commentators kind of, they played it off too. But yeah, our debut music, Celine Dion.
So keep your mouth shut when you're around wrestlers. That's what I learned.
So instead of Billy and Chuck, y'all was Maurice and Jerome or Jamal.
We might have missed a boat on a hell of a gimmick.
It's never too late. It's never too late.
Did you see what I did there? Missed the boat? No.
Yeah. I got caught the pun.
Dad jokes. But so also in the story of David Schultz, someone works their way in. You can't talk about WWE without talking about Hulk Hogan, who was not necessarily a rookie, but he had moved down to where David Schultz was at this time, and he actually lived on David Schultz's couch with him. And David Schultz was so good, he cut a promo one time with his hillbilly family, which was kayfabe, but he was threatening his wife, telling her to get in the kitchen, and threatening his son to smack the smirk off of his face. He did it so good that people were calling Vince McMahon the next day saying, hey, not even calling him. They called the police, and the police went to Vince McMahon and said, you got to give us his address because we're taking him in for spousal abuse and child abuse.
Yeah, they said they had a warrant.
The good old days when kayfabe was real.
Right. And so, as I brought up earlier, at this time, there was a lot of murmuring about professional wrestling, and Jim Cornette actually brings up one time back in history about, I think he said like around 1930, where the business had got exposed by an expose by a reporter, and it took 15 years for the industry to recover in New York at the time because, of course, the internet wasn't around, so news didn't travel as fast as it does these days. But the word had been out, and it took a long time for them to recover from it. So now we're in the 1980s, and you had the reporter John Stossel, who was a journalist for ABC. He said that he had been a wrestler in high school, the grappling kind of wrestler and everything, and he would always get embarrassed and upset when people would always compare what he did to professional wrestling. And so he just was like, I thought it was bullshit, and I was going to set out to expose the business. And he said they shouldn't call it a sport. They should call it entertainment. And everybody heard this rule. What's the number one cardinal rule of professional wrestling back in the day? Chris Black?
Protect the business.
Don't expose the business. And so there was a guy by the name of Eddie Mansfield.
Bitch.
So Eddie Mansfield was a wrestler for the WWF as well, who thought that he was hot shit, but really wasn't getting anywhere, wasn't making the money that he felt he should be making, and didn't have a position in the company that he felt he should have. So since he was sour at the business for little pay and no benefits, and he was also one of the people trying to unionize professional wrestling and basically get everybody on the same page, he decided to expose wrestling secrets to ABC.
I just called dude a bitch, but to his credit, I will give him credit for standing up for himself. He said the promoters wanted to have them kick back 20% of their pay, and he was like, hell no. And he got blackballed because of that. So if I'm going to give him any credit, I'll give him credit for standing up for himself. Now, but from becoming bitch made, that's a whole different thing.
Yeah, he said, I didn't quit the wrestling business. Wrestling quit me.
Right.
When he wouldn't kick back.
Saying it is with them.
What's the worst deal that a promoter ever tried to give you for doing a show?
The free 99? Shit.
Well, worse than that is always the pay to play.
Well, yeah, we've heard of that. But I remember my very first wrestling match. I was like 4 hours away for, goddamn it, I'm not going to admit this, Dark Child. I drove 4 hours, and although I knew the pay wasn't going to be that good, this player handed me $5. I was like, what the fuck?
I remember one
I
time,
felt like saying, you could have just kept that. But
I remember
whatever.
one time while I was in Tennessee, I did a show, and we do the show, and like the promoter was like on house arrest. So this player wrestled with an ankle bracelet. But anyway, so we do this show, right? The show's over. We waiting to get paid, and we like, hey, where'd dude go? And we realized this dude didn't left. He done wrestled and left. So I go over to the ring, and I was like, hey, because they was breaking the ring down. I said, hey, give me that rope. I was going to take one of the wrestling ring ropes. I'm like, y'all going to pay me. But what ended up happening was a bunch of the wrestlers kind of got together, the ones that did get paid, and they actually, broke a little bit of what they got paid off to us. So we left with something, not what we were supposed to get, and then we just never worked with that guy again.
That would be hilarious. Like, he left and you pissed off, and let's imagine you had a trailer or a truck. You'd be like, hey, put that in my truck. I'm holding this ring hostage till I get my money.
Right, like, how you gonna leave your ring? Like, okay.
I mean, we've seen guys take merch from the promotion if they didn't try to, up them dollars.
Ain't nobody fuck nobody wife long dick style though.
I've heard them stories too.
Why, you gonna pay one way or another?
What'd you say about Dark Child?
Shots fired. I need a soundboard. I can't wait till I upgrade this this show.
Hot dog and a hand job? What?
So, anyways, Eddie Mansfield exposed the business. He taught John Stossel pretty much the ways of the ring, and they broadcast this on national television. And so his next stop was to the WWF, and he met the Iron Sheik. He met a bunch of other people. Vince McMahon says that he goes up to Dr. D and says, hey, I'm going to introduce this journalist to you. He's here. He's trying to expose the business and find out what's going on with the business. So Vince said to him, and this was the quote that we were given. He says that Dr. D says that Vince told him, blast him, tear his ass up, and stay in character, stay in character as Dr. D.
One of the things that we learned in this series thus far is that cocaine is a hell of a drug, and Vince McMahon is an asshole. Now, this is the first episode that we don't have to talk about cocaine.
Although it did rear its head once.
Did it?
Yeah, I'll explain when we get there.
Well, I guess cocaine is in it too. But Vince McMahon is a motherfucker. All right, I'm going to let you continue. We're going to get to when Vince McMahon is a motherfucker.
And so, like I said, John Stossel comes up to Dr. D. He's asking him some questions. Dr. D is staying in character, as intense as all hell. Even John Stossel was like, I was very intimidated and kind of scared. This guy is huge, and the way he's looking and stuff. And he looked like he was a little aggravated. He's like, I almost started not to ask him the question, but then I did and said, hey, I think that this is fake. Now, Dr. D said that at that moment, he felt like he said, I think you're fake. And one of the things that he says is that He's like, I'm not fake. Ain't nothing fake about me. He's like, you can call me a con artist. You call me anything that you want to, but fake is something that I'm not. And so he slaps him on the right side of his head. He goes down. John Stossel's like, what the fuck? Then he's like, he gets up, and Dr. D slaps him on the other side of his head. And after that, he saunters off. John Stossel does. Excuse me. Dr. D goes out to the ring to wrestle Antonio Inoki. And now I know where the cocaine is coming from.
Yeah.
I'm looking at my notes. And then he comes back to the locker room and everything, and like because when he was wrestling, of course, he had no idea what was going on backstage, but this picked up an entire shitstorm for Dr. D, and so they basically said like, hey, John Stoss was very upset or whatever, and Vince says don't worry about it, we'll take care of it, just head home and stuff, keep your head low, and we'll take care of it. What it turns out happening is that John Stossel sued the WWF, but he didn't sue Dr. D. And he sued them. Well, we don't know what he sued them for, but we do know that WWF settled and paid John Stossel $280,000. Now, one of the interesting things about this is that, and this is I'm going to point out the parts that we got from David Schultz, but as far as on the Viceland, what John Stossel says is that he had to go get evaluated by WWF doctors. And when he went to the WWF doctor, he described his syndrome as, I couldn't even figure out the word that he said, but it was like
Gerosomatic illness.
Okay, there you go. You wrote it down. Gerosomatic syndrome. He's like, well, what the hell is that? And he's like, you're only feeling the pain until you get compensated. And John Stossel was like, what the fuck? Get out of here. You're working for them or whatever. Like, you didn't even evaluate me. You didn't even take a look at me. You got no idea what's going on. And this is where I wanted to slap John Stossel, because this little mealy-mouthed asshole basically says, he's like, but then eventually I think he was right, because he's like, I did feel better once I got my $280,000.
Yeah, right.
Which I feel like you should be able to go back and get that money back. Like, statute of limitations, I know 20 years or whatever passed, but oh my God, I wanted to slap him. Like, he just looked like an ass. John Stossel here comes off terrible. He doesn't come off as bad as that police officer from the Jimmy Snuka one, but he comes off pretty damn bad.
Yeah,
But,
well,
I mean,
here's the thing. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
So here's the thing, like, because I've listened to a couple of Dr. D's things that are out there, like interviews and stuff like that. And one of the things is, this dude is a legitimate badass. Like, they talked about in training, like, he was whooping the shit out of people to the point where they told the trainer, like, hey, I can't work with this dude. This dude is too stiff, and they had to break him down and be like, hey, okay, this is a work. The snitch wrestler, I forgot his name already. The snitch wrestler,
Eddie Mansfield. You should know that name.
He said, "Do not interact with Dr. D."
Yeah, I ain't never met an Eddie.
So as soon as he came down that hallway to get interviewed, he should have been going the other way. So he was kind of set up, but it wasn't like nobody warned him.
All right. And I guess that's something I did kind of gloss over, is that they talked about when he was being trained by Herb Welch. Originally, he thought that all the wrestling business was completely legitimate. And so the way they trained people back in the old days was they just stretched them, went in there and just beat the hell out of people to see how tough they were. And most people just wouldn't make it. But during his training, Dr. D was whooping everybody's ass. And they're like, hey, man, this guy, like, he would bring in training partners to work with him who didn't know that he didn't know that it wasn't that it was a work. And so they're like, hey, you got to smarten this kid up.
Right.
He said it used to be so bad. He said he used to go home from training. He would drive up to his house, honk his horn. His wife would have to help him get out of the car, get him in the house, and then he'll do it all again the next day.
So
that's how much they was whooping on him.
So when you
but he was whooping on them too.
So when you build that training facility, we know the type of training we got to do.
But you know what? I will have to say that I don't blame them for that type of training, because you do got to see who's going to wash out and who's not, because you don't want to waste your time with some fly-by-night wannabe. So I can understand them kind of, sifting through the bullshit just so they can, find someone that is genuinely, got what it takes to be part of this business.
What did you say about 2,000 wrestlers, Jim Cornette? What did you say? That's what I think about it. It's too many people. Too many people in the business right now that shouldn't be in the business, and that's why, I feel Jim Cornette when he says what he says on his podcast, because these people haven't been tried and tested.
Nope.
Well, that's
like I said. I walked in my first day thinking it was a tryout, meaning that you have to show them something, otherwise they'll be like, "Sorry."
Yeah, that's what I was saying, is that you got a lot of people who play tough guy. Back in the day, you had people who were actually tough guys because of you were vetted. Are you strong enough? If something goes wrong in that ring where you're hurt, do you have the fortitude to push through? The show must go on.
Or the great Angel Armani or other people have also said, the marks are in the ring now.
Right. And that was also another thing. You push people in training like that, and then you bring them into the business and smarten them up. They're gonna protect the business, because whatever justice you were served, or however you want to put it, whatever you were served to get in, that's gonna be the same gate that you're gonna make other people pass through to get to where you are.
That's why I loved Dr. D's response to that little guy, that little arrogant reporter's questions, when he's like, "So do you like this business?" It's like, "Of course, I wouldn't be in this business if I didn't like it." "Well, why is it a good business?"
Make a lot of money.
And he was like, "Because it's a tough guy business. You have to be tough to be in it. That's why you're not in the business. That's why this cameraman's not in the business." And then he addresses the crowd. "That's why all these rednecks are not in the business, because they can't cut it." I love that answer.
Yeah, he said it makes me a lot of money. So then on the flip side, like Xavier Mustafa said, Eddie Mansfield had warned John Stossel, don't interview Dr. D, because it's real to him, damn it. But also at the same time, Eddie had been forced out of the business due to receiving death threats. People were trying to plant cocaine on him, and he even left the South and moved back to New York with a security detail accompanying him because of how serious people took the
season
business.
2 is cocaine.
Just be called the dark side of cocaine.
So John Stossel sued WWE. He didn't sue Dr. D, but Vince McMahon kept trying to get Dr. D to sign papers saying that he acted all on his own, he didn't receive any directives. Dr. D said, "I'm not signing anything because you told me to light his ass up and stay in character," and that's what I did. So like I said, John Stossel got the $280,000 settlement, and so we move on from there to WrestleMania 1. This is when WWE is really starting to take off. WrestleMania 1, we're going to have Mr. T taking on Hulk Hogan. And as we said before, Hulk Hogan and Dr. D were pretty good friends. He let Hulk Hogan live in his place and everything like that. But at this WrestleMania, Dr. D is left off the card, and he's a little jealous of seeing the way that they're treating Mr. T, because they're paying Mr. T more than all the boys in the back. Mr. T is getting all this TV time, and again, Dr. D isn't on the card. So he's backstage one day, and Mr. T is back there, and they're talking and everything. And I guess he says talking, but I'm pretty sure it probably did turn to yelling, possibly. This is one of those things that I had heard about for years, and you get a different story depending on who's telling it.
Let me just interject for a second. I realized after watching some of the other interviews that Schultz did, they kind of fudged up this story. It wasn't actually WrestleMania 1. It was an incident where Mr. T was supposed to be sitting in the crowd, and Chief Strongbow was told Dr. D, Vince says if you go down there and you mess with Mr. T, meaning at ringside, he would fire him. And that's why Hogan came up with that bullshit story.
Well, no, they didn't fudge it up because it was two separate incidents. It was two different incidents that happened. One was he was there and he was backstage and they ended up getting into it, and I guess they had some words or whatever. But then the next one was Mr. T was sitting in the crowd and Dr. D had approached him in the crowd, and then Jay Strongbro decided to fire him, and Dr. D was escorted out by the police and arrested. But like nothing physical had happened or anything like that. They were just nervous about the entire situation. And in 2019, Hulk Hogan told the story that that this doesn't make Mr. T look good at all, but that Dr. D had slapped Mr. T, and that's why he got arrested and fired from the WWE. And he says while he's sitting at home, he's watching television, and Hulk Hogan goes on the television show and he chokes out another journalist and drops him on the ground, head cracked open on the floor and everything, and faced no repercussions. But I guess you don't slaughter golden goose for because you gotta eat off that golden goose for as long as possible. And so now Dr. D is out of the WWF and looking for work. So where does he go in the 80s? He goes back on the Indies, but he feels he's been blackballed.
You also got to bring up too that Vince McMahon tried to get him to sign a hold harmless. Did you bring that up?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, sorry, I thought I missed it. Thought you missed it. Never mind.
Yeah, so he was.
Which around he's a dick.
So he was feeling that he was being blackballed by Vince McMahon, and nobody wanted to work with him. Like the closest that I did kind of gloss over one thing is that while the lawsuit was going on, Vince McMahon had actually sent Dr. D over to Japan to wrestle, and they actually did a storyline over there where he was just slapping out reporters as his gimmick, and that's actually part of the proof that John Stossel presented in court, was that this was a violent individual who was going around just beating up journalists. That was part of his argument in court, and so that's why WWE just decided to settle, because it just wasn't a good look. Would you say like Lance Archer is kind of the Dr. D of right now as far as gimmick?
Nah. Trying to be. See,
but I'm not because I like Lance Archer, but most of that is gimmick. I mean, like,
that's what I mean. Just as far as like that, his gimmick where he knocks over like people at ringside, knocks out people in the crowd. Of course, they're plants if you didn't know, but just the intensity going there, just beating people up. Because we had a conversation. No idea is original. There's nothing new under the sun. It's not what you do, but how it's done. And so, like, we see the same storylines and arcs and characters have pretty much always existed. I don't think there's been like people just do it different or they do it more intense. Like in the 80s, yeah, Lance Archer would have probably been a lot more violent, and you would really think that he was maybe a madman or something like that. But they've adapted it for today's audience.
But you know what? Looking at, because I've heard of David Schultz before, but I've never really dug into this before this topic. Yeah. And he truly was something different.
Right.
Like, I would have loved to have seen where his career would have went, because he was one hell of a heel. He was a great promo.
Right.
Damn, the business really missed out.
Yeah. And go ahead.
I was like, the one thing that I think is missing in wrestling nowadays is a lot of wrestlers back then, they looked like badasses. They wrestled like badasses. If they was in the ring with a jobber, they whooped that ass, and then they pinned them 1, 2, 3. That was it. None of this today, like Kenny Omega giving this no-name person a million kickouts and finishers and stuff like that. That's the problem with wrestling nowadays. That's why I can't believe in a Lance Archer and guys like that, because I don't think they're legitimate badasses. I don't think we've had a legitimate looking badass since JBL.
Well, that's
Brock
what they said. Like in the introduction,
Lesnar.
they said that the whole point of pro wrestling back then, the whole point of kayfabe is you're supposed to make the fight look real. That is what I feel is missing in pro wrestling. Is everything looks so choreographed. It doesn't look real anymore.
Yeah. The only reason, and I just want to throw this out. The only reason I was bringing up the Lance Archer because, like, his storyline is that he was too violent for the United States, so he was sent away to Japan, where he created a name for himself, and now he's back.
Yeah, he was Lance something else before Lance Archer.
Right. So that was the only reason I was bringing it up, and it just kind of reminds me of the gimmick that WWE could have worked, because WWE actually had gold there. Like, they could have played off of it the same way Japan did. Yeah, they had to pay that $280,000, but you was bringing in Mr. T, you was doing all this other stuff. Same thing we experienced this year already with WWE making all those cuts. People arguing that you guys had the money to support those wrestlers during the pandemic, and you could have kept them on. But
I listened to a couple shoot interviews of David Schultz, and he said one of the reasons why Vince was like kind of in a hurry to get rid of him is because Hulk Hogan started complaining, saying that David Schultz is a little too rough, and Hulk Hogan was actually scared. Again, this is coming from David Schultz, so this is from his perspective. He said that Hulk Hogan basically was threatened that David Schultz would pin him in the ring and take the title. And he basically told Vince, "Look, dude, it's either me or Schultz."
And, even though he brought him there.
Yeah. Well, because remember, the top guys, I mean, even, I don't know about now, but even when we first broke in, the top guys really were holding on to their spot. And he saw him as a threat because he had way more charisma than Hogan. Oh, okay, I'm not going to say that. I think he would have outshined Hogan. So,
but see, he was good at being a heel, and that's what Hogan should want. I mean, well, we know that's what Hogan does want, because I mean, he's handpicked his opponents for the last 40 years, and I know he brought him there for that purpose. So you bring him there for that purpose, just
no, he brought him up there because he knew that it would help him get over. Hulk Hogan liked to use people and then, throw them out when he's done with them.
I mean, it's true, but you still get that good rub from being in a program with Hogan as a heel.
True that. And that was one of the promises that were made listening to the shoot interview. He said that Vince McMahon promised him that after the 6 to 8 months in Japan, when everything just kind of blew over, he would come back and start a program with Hogan. That's what he was promised.
You brought up something kind of interesting. Have you ever had to shoot pin somebody, or have you been at a show where somebody got shoot pinned?
Yep.
And what came of it?
I don't. Did Armani shoot pin somebody?
Yes. Yes. And it was a Legacy Pro show. He got pissed. I think it was actually against Brown Sugar, I think that's who it was. Don't quote me on that. But he got frustrated and he just pinned him and got out the ring.
He hooked him.
So is that the story that you was already thinking of, or was it a different story when you said yes the first time?
I know I've seen it happen. I think it was another story other than that, but I can't think of it right now. But yeah, definitely that one happened.
Okay,
I've always said that if someone wanted to get way too aggressive with me, whether I was scheduled to win or not, I know how to make a guy tap. So never had to do that because no one really, have tried me like that before.
Devin August, step right up.
He can try if he want to. That's the new phrase. I'll go David Schultz on your ass.
He's had a couple of months off. He might just be training, come out looking like Jinder Mahal.
Like a jobber?
You know what? Y'all gonna stop disrespecting my champion. All right. Did y'all see the awesome performance he put on the other day, making his return?
Y'all hear Chris
Yeah.
Black? Y'all hear Chris Black talking all of this stuff, knowing he gonna show up looking like Tank Abbott at the next Legacy Pro show.
Shit, I hope not. Been working on my cardio lately. Went on a long ass bike ride with the kids today. My ass was tired.
So, David Schultz is out of WWE. He tried the whole Indies thing, but felt like he got blackballed. So, what's the next thing for a guy like David Schultz to go and do? He becomes a bounty hunter, a real life bounty hunter, not Dog the bounty hunter. And this is very interesting. They didn't go very much into detail about his bounty hunting days, but if you guys are interested, go and listen to some of the shoot interviews that he did, especially the one with Jim Cornette. He goes into detail about chasing people down in Puerto Rico and Brazil and Egypt and just going all around the world, just tracking people down who have jumped bail. And now he has to be the one to go and track them down. And he said he wasn't even really using technology. People knew who he was and they respected him, and they would just give information to him. And he would talk to people, and he would go and find these people and bring them to justice. And he even said sometimes he was even the bail bondsman and the bounty hunter. That he would bail them out and then had to go and arrest them and then let them get bailed out again. He'd go arrest them again. So it's very interesting lifestyle. You guys got anything to say about the bounty hunting?
I thought it was a cool listen, him telling the stories about that. Again, just proves that he is a legitimate badass. One of the stories that I really popped for, and I can't, because of so many interviews I listened to, it may have been the Jim Cornette one, where he said he was in New York, and he said he saw a dog, was like, come here, boy, come here. And then it was a big ass rat.
That's funny as hell. All right. Oh,
Yeah, man. That bounty hunting business. Yeah, hey, you gotta have balls because like you're going after like criminals, like they jump bail for a reason, and if their bail is high, that means they probably did some shit. So I mean, it's a dangerous business to get into. And like you said, when he was doing it, not too many people were into it. But I mean, at 10% of the bond, it's pretty good money if you have high bonds.
Right. And this is our second bounty hunter of the season. Do you remember who the first bounty hunter was?
Yeah, did you see me laughing a second ago when you brought up bounty hunting? Because I was thinking to myself, take away the knives. Do you think he would kick New Jack's ass? I would have loved to see a match between them two.
Not if he was on cocaine.
But minus the knives, if he had no weapons.
Hey, he didn't have no weapons. Well, he had a weapon when he threw the guy off the scaffolding, but not the first time he threw him off of the scaffolding. So David Schultz says in the midst of him bounty hunting, he's sitting at home one day, he's watching television, and this is just 4 years after WrestleMania, and Vince McMahon goes on television. And this was to save the WWE money with the sports and athletic commissions around the country, where he went to them and said, hey, look, you guys shouldn't be taxing us as a sport. We're not a sport. It's predetermined, and we're an entertainment company. We're not a sports company. And New Jersey was the first one to take that and run with it. And so he's like, you fired me for saying that I exposed the business, and now you're on television 4 years later exposing the business.
That's why a lot of the old school guys did not have respect for McMahon after he just destroyed kayfabe. But I understand why he did it. He mostly wanted to stop all that drug testing. That's what he basically really wanted to get rid of, because actors, I mean, let's be honest. Some of them actors be on the juice, you know what I'm saying, to make the role, because you got to fit a character. Now, that's why Vince wants to be seen as an entertainment company, not sports, because you're not really cheating anything if you're using enhancement products. This isn't a real sport, quote unquote.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about it is it was funny because if you think about it, Vince McMahon is responsible for like the BCWs of the world and the Legacy Pros of the world, and different things like that. Like that has such such a far-reaching effect. Him going and saying wrestling is predetermined, because think about the taxes and all the regulations that you had being classified as a sport, having to have medical staff on, having to pay taxes to the state for holding the event, and all the money that had to come out of the pocket. He destroyed the indies, but saved the indies all in one swoop with that step right there. And also, like you said, it was to save himself money, but also to possibly usher in and allow them to not have the drug testing and have wrestlers be bigger than they ever were, which there was an explosion in the size of wrestlers following that revelation as well.
You know, I want to bring up something, and I know Mustafa is going to be familiar with this. This is the some independent companies are still under certain regulations, certain you have to have certain what do they call it? God damn it. I want to say passes, but that's not what I mean. Licenses and stuff like that. You have to be insured, blah, 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 which you should be, but some states are a little more harsh than others. One of the main reasons why real professionals, professional wrestlers, trained professionals, I'm going to keep saying that word, hate backyard wrestlers is because if y'all dumbasses end up hurting yourself or killing yourself in the ring, that's going to bring down regulation on us. That's why we do not like yarders at all. Go get trained or stay the fuck out the ring.
Thought Xavier Mustafa was going to say something.
Oh, no, I had nothing to add to that. He nailed that one right on the head.
Yeah, I know, like, Louisiana is one of those cities where they still require you to have your licenses and everything like that. WWE gets an exception when they go down there, though, because, you know, they're considered a professional organization. But all these other companies that come to town when WrestleMania is there or something like that, they're like, hey, we don't know who the hell you are. You got to get a license, buddy.
You notice the WWE stays away from Kentucky? There's a reason.
Well, Jim Cornette is there.
Well, no, it's because every time, for some reason, Vince had this thing where every time he went to Kentucky, he'll have a match where there was blood. And it was the last one he had with, I think, Stephanie. I think that was the last time they was there because Vince had the attitude of, you know, okay, who do I cut the check to? And so Kentucky was like, no, that's not how that works. From what I understand, that was a Kentucky thing. I may be wrong, but that's what I heard.
We had to write into Jim Cornette's drive-thru and see what he has to say about that. Well, as far as final quotes of the show, they asked David Schultz, I didn't write it down verbatim, how he felt about the whole situation with John Stossel, and he says he's over it pretty much. Like, he's willing to sit down and talk to him man to man. He's not going to slap him. He's not going to hurt him or do anything to him. And so that was all fine and dandy. Then they go to Eddie Mansfield, which Eddie Mansfield sounded like an asshole, very pretentious, because he's like, he blames John Stossel for what happened to him. And so he says, God's job is to forgive John Stossel, but I'm not God.
Another quote I love.
God's job is to forgive John Stossel, but I'm not God. That was Eddie Mansfield's last words to the documentary. And then John Stossel's last words was, fuck you, David Schultz. Knowing damn well he wouldn't say that shit if David Schultz was right there in his face.
I just want to say in real life, if somebody ever slapped me like that and I don't do nothing, I'm probably just going to kill myself. Because as a man, to get slapped like that
twice
and not do it, yeah, twice, and to not be able to do anything, that would take all my masculinity away.
Stephanie McMahon has been doing that to wrestlers for the last 15 years.
Yeah, but they expect it. Shit.
Right, and that's a woman. Like, she ain't even slapping you that hard. Well, I don't know. She did slap a couple people hard as shit.
Jim Cornette said how dude didn't even really rear back and slap him. He was like, if he would have, reared back and actually hit him, he probably would have laid him out.
He would have snapped his whole head, would have spent around on his neck.
And everybody just heard what Xavier Mustafa said, and I've slapped this man like that so many damn times.
Right.
Go and do it. I got the gun right here. But yeah, John Stossel is an asshole. Eddie Mansfield can't go around blaming other people. What are your thoughts on Eddie Mansfield? Like, I know you guys didn't really express too much about it here, but how do you guys feel about what he did? I know it's times are different now, and hindsight is different, but you guys are still in the business, and you already expressed how there's a lot of people in the business that shouldn't be in the business. Do you feel that what Eddie Mansfield did really hurt the business for the worse, and did also what he did, do you feel like it is the reason that there are a lot of people in the business now that don't deserve to be or shouldn't be?
So yeah, that hurts the business tremendously. So first you had that jackass, and then here comes along when they were doing the secrets of the ring or the ring secrets revealed, and I forgot what wrestler that was that did that, and then all of a sudden you just open up the floodgates. Like, why? What? It does it make you happier to know the magician's secret, or is it
I don't
just
want to know the
cooler?
magician's secrets.
Yeah, I mean, or is it just cooler to not know and just be baffled about it? Like, I don't know. I'm one of those type of people that do like to know the secrets, but if I don't know the secrets, it's still like, okay, this is cool. I don't know how this happened. I'm gonna stress out trying to figure it out. But let it be. Like the wrestling business would be so much in a better place if it wasn't totally exposed. But you got to thank Vince McMahon for that too, because he didn't help the situation. He's trying to make movies like he gets to do now because of the whole COVID thing. But yeah.
Yeah, my thoughts on this whole Eddie Mansfield guy. First of all, who? Like, there's a reason you're not known at all, bro. Like, you got pissed off. Like I said, I give him the only credit I give him for standing up for himself. I mean, I can give any man a credit for that. But you don't go bitch and get all butthurt and want to expose the business now. Like, even today, if some non-wrestling fan or whatever comes up to me and asks that stupid bullshit, hey, so is it real? Let me ask you a question, bro. If I were to hit you as hard as I hit the guys, will it hurt? But they don't ever want to find that out.
I'll tell him, let me suplex you right now and see if you
Right.
get up.
It's like, fuck that. I've literally shed blood, sweat, and tears for this business. Don't you dare fucking call it fake. In this day, in 2020, do not call that shit fake.
You do it. That's what I got to say. You do it.
Right.
It's fake, you do it.
Yeah, get in the ring.
And you brought up Wrestling Secrets Exposed from 1998. So we already know 1987 was Eddie Mansfield and Jim Wilson. And there's conflicting names when it comes to the 1998 one. The ones I found were Anthony Durante as Pitbull #2, Michael Modest, Gary Wolf, and then the Stunt Granny. And then they also say that Christopher Daniels and Harley Race.
I don't believe the last two.
I don't know. I believe Harley Race for some reason. I don't know why.
Said he was the booker. So,
No.
so I don't know, but yeah, me not being in the industry, you kind of like to know how the candy is made, but that kills the magic of it. Is the reason that the suspension and the disbelief isn't what it is anymore. But also, I think that as much as the business has been exposed, I do feel that if there were compelling characters, you could bring kayfabe back in the way that it was, and maybe not in exactly the way that it was. Maybe that's not the best way to put it, but at least where people could buy into it and not think that it's bullshit.
Well, see, that's the one thing I love about the indies is that the fact that it's a more intimate setting and that for the most part the fans are a lot closer than they are in a 50,000 seat arena. You have to lay your shit in order for it to look convincing. There's nothing more satisfying than if I get a guy in a corner and I'm working him over with punches and I hear the guy in the front row go, damn, that's satisfying. It knows that I'm doing my job properly.
Somebody brought this up, and I'm going to misquote them, but I'm going to almost get the quote. They said wrestling back in the day, you had a clown, you had an accountant, you had a mortician, you had a dentist, you had all these outlandish characters, and people believed wrestling was real. Today, you got guys that can do 839, 47 flips. They can do acai moonsaults off of everything, and wrestling is faker than it's ever been.
Facts.
Funniest thing is nowadays we got a real dentist in there. We got a guy with a real PhD. we got a
Hey,
real
who's
a
the dentist?
we got a real shoot fighter.
You got clowns like Gender.
Hold on. Not today. Don't you do that. Bad Chris Black.
But other than that, you guys want to give out your social medias? This was a fun episode of Dark Side of the Ring. So.
You can catch me at Xavier Mustafa on Facebook and Twitter. You can also catch my solo podcast, Ep7 Cinema. And you can catch my Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Ep7 Cinema as well.
You can catch me at The Natural Chris Black on Facebook and Instagram, and at the_natural_CB. You know, I'm going to curse myself one day because I may get that call like, hey, we need you to do a job. Really? Who am I going to job against? His name is Jinder Mahal.
You can also catch Chris Black catching his ass whooping if you keep talking about my boy, Jinder Mahal.
You want to see a shoot pin on TV.
Now, you know who the call is going to be. It's going to be Heath Slater's been booked for Legacy Pro, and you're going to have to shout out to him. Well, what's that you've been talking about, my bandmate? And
it's like, hey, kayfabe, brother, kayfabe.
But anyways, you guys are already here on YouTube, so be sure to subscribe, give us a like up there, hit that thumbs up, leave us a comment, and hit that bell so that you're notified whenever we upload new episodes. We're going to be continuing our Dark Side of the Ring coverage. I don't even know what the next episode is. I know it's episode 8. I don't know what it's covering. I don't have it in front of me. Maybe Chris Black can help me out while I run down everything. Also, be sure to subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcast from. Just search Saturday Night Slamcasters and it should pop right up for you guys. Also, you can follow me over there on Twitter at Slamcaster TE78. And you can also find us on Facebook at Saturday Night Slamcasters. And you can also use the hashtag Come Get Slammed. What's going on, Chris Black? Chris Black is muted.
So Chris Black is on mute, but Chris Black, you're on mute. But the next episode, go ahead.
It's literally called Cocaine and Cowboy Boots. From story. The saga continues.
Cocaine is a hell of a drug. I can't wait to get a soundboard. Be sure.
This episode sponsored by cocaine.
No, this episode is brought to you by the letter C for cocaine. Off-White.
Oh my God.
That boy.
I can't.
But all right, yeah, we're up out of here. Holla at your boys. Come get slammed. Peace.